expression that I have, or to read my lips. Now, lip reading can be important in space because space stations can be noisy places.
Okay, I copy. Fine.
And when the noise gets higher, people tend to read lips to make sure that the communication is effective. So taking those 3 points, the facial edema, the noisy background, and the multiple orientations of the face, communications between astronauts in space could become a problem.
As the duration of space travel increases and the crews become more diverse in every way, greater attention is being focused on the human dimension of spaceflight. Imagine you're one of a dozen or so people selected to spend 3 to 6 months on a permanent space station. You'll be living with the rest of the crew in a cramped, noisy module. No privacy or easy ways to escape the daily tensions. Over time, stress-related medical problems, including anxiety, depression, and hostility, become threats to your optimal performance.
The manual flying up onto the V-bar and into the...
For the first time in history, NASA funded a program to look at the psychosocial dynamics of space missions. What better place to do this than on Space Station Mir? Mir was a 15-year Russian-based project from 1986 to 2001 that was designed to study astrophysics and conduct biological research with international crews. Psychiatrist Nick Canis at the University of California in San Francisco was granted unprecedented access to study gender, cultural differences, and crew relations aboard Space Station Mir.
We studied a total of 13 astronauts and cosmonauts who had flown in space and 58 people on the ground, both Americans and Russians, who were based at the Russian Mission Control. And we're interested in looking at tension, cohesion, and leadership in space, and tension, cohesion, and leadership on the ground, and the relationship between crew members and people on the ground. There's a phenomenon called displacement where you don't get along with your boss and you can't express your feelings to your boss, so you go home and you yell at your wife or you take it out on somebody else who's innocent. Well, that kind of phenomenon occurs in space.
Another 4 or 5 minutes, and I think we'll be able to protect the payload. I want you to protect the payload. Yes, sir. Okay.
Sometimes when crew members are mad at people on the ground, it may reflect something about the crew more than the interaction itself. I think studies like mine are beginning to open the door. The psychology of these people are really important. They're not just machines doing jobs. Not only can you avoid problems and lead to more productivity, but I think one can even enhance the psychological well-being and make these experiences humanistically better for the subjects and the crew members they are launching into space.
From solving interpersonal problems in space to resolving social challenges on the ground, psychological research can improve our lives. One of the areas in which psychology plays a crucial role is in our legal system. Psychologists help assess testimony and advise jury selection. One of the more dramatic uses of psychology in the courtroom involves evidence based on allegations from children. Today's psychological science is being used in law enforcement and in courts to better identify and decipher critical information to help separate fact from fiction. In the early 1990s, 7 people in Edenton, North Carolina were indicted for sexual crimes based solely on the testimony of children.
We, the jury, unanimously find the defendant guilty of first-degree sexual offense.
One of them was Little Rascals daycare owner Bob Kelly, who was convicted on 99 counts of child sexual abuse. After having served several years in jail, the charges were overturned upon appeal. Psychologist Stephen Ceci of Cornell University investigates the credibility of child witness testimony, how it was obtained, and how it stands up in court.
If you look at the mass allegation daycare cases, especially the ones in the 80s and early 90s, like the Edenton Little Rascals case in North Carolina, They all have something in common. There is an initial disclosure made by one child. It might be to a pediatrician, it might be to a parent, it might be to a teacher. But the child says something that's interpreted suspiciously, that someone or group of persons did something to them. And then what you find in these cases is a barrage of bad interviewing tactics. By that I mean things like repeated suggestions over long periods of time, encouraging the child to fantasize or engage in pretense play.
Bridget, who killed the babies?
Sometimes Miss Betsy or Mr. Bob.
Now, you told Miss Judy it happened in outer space. Didn't you, Bridget?
It was a spaceship.
They're interested in getting the goods. They're not interested in testing alternative explanations of their suspicion. They're interested in confirming their pet explanation.
There are over 3 million children interviewed every year by law enforcement, child protection, and mental health services. So it's imperative to use forensic interviewing methods that get the facts of an event in the child's own words, without repeated, leading, or suggestive questions.
A therapeutic interview engages the child in activities that a forensic interview would never use.
Jamie, can you tell me, did you like that school?
A therapist that's interviewing a child may feel that the child is not disclosing because there's some emotional blockage, maybe due to fear. And they'll say things to a child like, don't be afraid to tell. You'll feel better once you tell. Now, therapeutically speaking, that's not a bad thing to do. Forensically speaking, it's a very bad thing to do. Scientific research shows that when you give those kinds of instructions, you increase the rate of false responding by the child. They have a hard time distinguishing things that they really remember from things that they imagined.
I wasn't there that day, and I want to know what happened when he came to visit.
He was doing it so fast that he went...
Contrary to thinking of children as being naively unbiased in recalling an event, Cece has conducted research which reveals what can happen when a child is repeatedly, suggestively interviewed.
Really? How did he... So where is...
I'm going to show you a little boy. He's 4 years old. The first time he's asked the question, did you ever get your finger caught in a mousetrap and have to go to the hospital? He correctly says no. Never been to a hospital. We don't have a mousetrap at our house. And then the interviewers ask him to pretend that he got his finger caught in a mousetrap, to imagine what it would feel like, and so on. And the interviewer asked him to do that week in, week out, for 8, 10, 12, 14 straight weeks.
Yeah, and then what happened?
And then I went downstairs and said, Daddy, I want to eat lunch, and then it got stuck in the mousetrap.
Oh, down in the basement? Was your daddy down in the basement?
Yeah.
Yeah, what was he doing?
He was collecting firewood.
Oh.
And you'll notice
So how did your finger get near
how believable he is, because he's not lying. He's come to internalize the fantasy play, the imaginations, and the suggestions.
I bought it yesterday. The mouse was there yesterday. I caught my finger there yesterday.
Yesterday, and so when did you go to the hospital?
Yesterday.
And did you take the bandage off your finger? I see it's not there now.
When a child's lying, when they're trying to deliberately mislead their listener, there's always inconsistencies from session to session.